This is Eric Stell. In this section, I will be reading the excerpts from the Odyssey and rating them in each section from 1 to 5. I will be discussing the 12 key events in the Odyssey in my timeline. Let's get started, shall we? In part 1, Odysseus leaves for the Trojan War. This part of the story is considered a 2 because it's not important as the rest of each one, and is still a part of the call to battle. Odysseus, in part 2, after leaving the Trojan War, comes across the island of Sicyon, which, to his refusal and his men doing anyway, pillaging the island, after which they were attacked and lost 72 of his men. This is rated as a 4 as it shows the Greek values of loyalty in this expert, and shows Odysseus as a leader. In part 3, in the land of the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus finds himself finding his scouts after looking for them, not wanting to come home after eating the lotus. This shows him and the Greek values of home and what they mean, as well as showing Odysseus as a leader, forcing his men to leave in pursuit of going home. In the next expert, in part 4, Odysseus finds himself on a mysterious island known as the Island of the Cyclops. Too much of his curiosity and pride get the better of him throughout this part. Showing too much pride can be bad, and showing that curiosity can sometimes lead to something bad. In this part, I would rate a 3 as it shows the flaws of Odysseus and him realizing what he needs to fix about himself. In part 5, I would rate this as a 2, as it's not important to the story but still exists in the story arc. In part 6, Odysseus finds himself on a cannibalistic island after attempting to search for the scouts that he sent to search, finding them being eaten alive after being cooked, of course, finding them being eaten after being cooked. They, of course, run and leave, as this is I would rate this as a 3 as it still exists in the story, but not as important as all the others, showing that sometimes it's better to leave when things are extremely bad, and after which he comes to part 6. In part 7, I was supposed to say, Odysseus finds himself on Circe's island, where Odysseus learns to be somewhat humble and avoid making her angry. I would rate this as a 3 as it shows Odysseus is becoming more humble and being less prideful, getting hot-headed when there's no need for conflict. In part 8, Odysseus, when passing the area where the sirens are, knowing that it would be bad, he comes up with a plan, showing his leadership and puzzle-solving skills. I would rate this as a 4 as it shows all of those traits of leadership and puzzle-solving. In part 10, in part 9, I should say, I'm getting ahead of myself, Odysseus finds himself on the island of Helios, the god of the sun. Odysseus, to much of his refusal again, his men eat and slaughter and pillage the island in search of food and resources. They, of course, slaughter many of Helios's cattle, about 3 in total, to where Helios asks Zeus for the wrath to discipline them or give his wrath to them after they escape. suffering about a handful of men dying to their greed and gluttony. I would rate this as a 3 to 4 as it shows the bad side effects of being greedy and being gluttonous. This shows that Odysseus's men are being more greedy than usual. This also leads to them being stranded in part 10. In part 10, after having their ship destroyed, is captured by Clepasso for 7 years as he saw a way to escape. I would rate this as a 7 because this is the main story arc where Odysseus becomes more humble and less hot-headed. When, of course, he escapes, that leads us to part 11. After he escapes, dealing with the wrath of Zeus, washes ashore the island of Phaeacia, which I would rate this as a 3 as it shows Odysseus is becoming more humble. This also brings us back to the very beginning of where Odysseus is telling his story to the king to pray and hope he can go home finally. This shows how Greek value hospitality and loyalty. In part 12, after Odysseus finally comes home, he is more humble, pride, and learning how to be more humble and less prideful. Better to avoid conflict, if it can be avoided, than getting prideful and being a nuisance. This would be rated as a 5 as he finally gets to come home and be a father figure to his son. Also, finding his dog showing loyalty in the expert, as well as many other parts. I would rate this as a 5. This concludes part 4 and my review on my ticking timeline on the Odyssey. Thank you for joining me.